what have you learned from all your travels? What do you take away from your time? What do you take away?
Be open to experience, be willing to try new things, don't have a rigid plan, accept random acts of hospitality without judgment or fear. Don't be afraid to wander, don't be afraid to eat a bad meal. You know, if you don't risk the bad meal, you'll never get the magical one.